The exact moment I realized my career was being terminated was when Spencer Croft slid a thick manila folder across the conference table like he was dealing cards at a crooked casino in a dusty border town. "We can easily replace your position with someone much cheaper," he said, that smug human resources smirk practically branded onto his smooth face. I did not say a word right away. I had a whole buffet of razor-sharp retorts marinating on the tip of my tongue. But my direct manager, Julian Mercer, was sitting beside him, blinking rapidly like a nervous rabbit, apologizing to incoming headlights. Julian mumbled something about corporate restructuring and how this decision was not personal, but by that point I was not hearing words so much as high-pitched static. White noise, pure corporate betrayal with a dial tone. My security access badge was revoked before I had even zipped up my heavy winter jacket. 12 years of my life. 12 solid years of building enterprise security architecture from the ground up, erased in 3 minutes by a condescending human resources clerk and a weak-chinned vice president. They escorted me toward the exit as if I were carrying active nuclear waste. Spencer did not even have the common decency to make the walk awkward. He simply handed me a $75 cardboard storage box like an indifferent grocery store clerk and turned back toward his office, already unwrapping whatever microwaved frozen meal he eats at 10 in the morning. My box contained the usual office remnants. A framed team photograph from 7 years ago, my custom ceramic caffeine mug, a desk succulent I had managed to keep alive through 4 corporate acquisitions, and a black flash drive I had forgotten was plugged into the back of my monitor. I held onto that drive a little tighter, feeling its cold metal casing press against my palm. The glass lobby smelled of cheap floor cleaner and broken promises. I did not shed a tear. 55-year-old men who have survived 2 tech bubbles do not cry in front of corporate executioners. But I did pause on the concrete plaza outside, looking back up at that 30-story monolith of tinted glass and steel. I stared directly at the 7th floor where Vault DC9 was situated, the core data center, my data center. The high-density server vault I had personally designed when executive management slashed our security budget 2 years ago and instructed me to get creative with physical infrastructure protection. So I did. I constructed a multi-layered biometric access framework so impenetrable it made federal vaults look like screen doors, because the board refused to approve $1,200 for a secondary administrator license. I implemented a custom fail-safe handshake protocol keyed exclusively to my physical attributes, my palm print, my retina scan, and my voice override. Over the past 18 months, I had submitted 3 separate formal written risk assessments warning Julian that having a single point of failure violated standard corporate governance principles and internal compliance rules. Every single memo came back with the same dismissive note telling me to defer the expense to next fiscal quarter. Sitting in my car in the parking lot, I remembered chuckling to myself months ago, wondering what would happen if they ever decided to push me out. I had always brushed the thought aside because I was loyal, because I believed my 18 years of industry experience made me indispensable, and because I was foolish enough to trust corporate promises. Now, staring at the cold rain beating against my windshield, I threw the cardboard box onto the passenger seat, gripped the leather steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, and let out a long, ragged exhale. Humiliation has a distinct metallic taste, in case you were wondering. But as I shifted into drive and pulled onto the highway, a quiet realization began to take root in the back of my mind. Not despair, not panic, but a cold mathematical clarity. I drove home on pure muscle memory, barely registering the traffic lights. Halfway across town while waiting at an intersection, the full picture clicked into place. The biometric access lock on Vault DC9 took nearly 2 years of hardware calibration to deploy. State-of-the-art triple-layer scanning architecture, one master admin credential stored on local encrypted firmware, mine, my palm print, my retina, my voice signature. They had never updated the fail-safe registry. I knew they had not because I had asked Julian 3 different times during our quarterly compliance reviews, and he had given me the exact same brushed-off answer about deferring hardware costs. Well, Julian, you are about to do some very fast laps around a locked steel vault door. Suddenly, the sting of being discarded vanished. I was no longer angry. I was intensely curious to see how long it would take a pair of overpaid executives to realize that the senior architect they just dumped on the street was the only human being on the planet holding the keys to their $35 million server core. When I stepped into my house at 11 in the morning, the silence was overwhelming. There was no hum of server cooling fans, no ambient chatter from the operations floor, no rhythmic typing from the surrounding cubicles where my team used to grind through system updates. Just the heavy, motionless quiet of a home that was not accustomed to having me inside it during working hours. I set the cardboard box down on the kitchen counter. The little succulent tipped over, spilling dry potting soil across the laminate surface like it had given up right alongside me. I stared at the mess for a full minute before sweeping it into the trash. I did not bother unpacking my framed certificates or my mug. What was the point of laying out souvenirs from a 12-year career that had just been liquidated in a 15-minute meeting? I booted up my personal laptop at the dining table with all the enthusiasm of a man 48 hours away from an existential crisis. The major executive job boards greeted me with their usual artificial cheerfulness, asking if I was ready to discover my next dream role. I scrolled through the listings half-heartedly. My fingers moved across the trackpad, but my mind was completely elsewhere. The same creeping doubts began to echo in my head. Am I getting too old for senior enterprise roles? Should I rewrite my executive summary to hide my age? Do I need to rebrand my entire background just to compete with 25-year-old kids who will work 60 hours a week for half my salary? I opened a folder titled Career Contingency that had remained untouched since the last major corporate merger. I opened my resume, stared at the bullet points describing 18 years of enterprise security engineering, and closed the file again. It all felt like ancient history that corporate leadership no longer valued. Then the phone calls began. The first incoming call arrived at 1 in the afternoon from an unlisted corporate extension. I let it vibrate across the wooden table until it went to voicemail. 45 minutes later, a second call came through from the exact same number. Then a third, spaced out with mechanical precision like someone sitting in a conference room, slowly succumbing to escalating panic. I did not pick up. There was no universe in which I was going to provide free technical support for an organization that had just marched me out of the building like a criminal. Instead, I opened a blank document and began drafting a detailed timeline of my termination, documenting every interaction, every memo, and every compliance warning I had issued over the past 2 years. Right as I was refining the timeline, my phone vibrated again. This time it was a direct text message from Clara Jenkins, a senior financial analyst in accounting who was one of the few people in the building with a strong moral compass and a sharp sense of humor. Her text read, "Hey Harvey, weird question, but nobody on the 4th floor can get into Vault DC9 at all. Did you update the master access codes before you left today?" I stared at the glowing screen, reading the sentence 3 times. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. I typed back a single word, no emojis, no explanations, just a plain statement of fact. Clara replied instantly with 3 exclamation points, followed by a message explaining that the entire executive wing was standing outside the server vault in a state of mass confusion. I set my phone on silent, flipped it face down on the table, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a generous glass of aged Cabernet. I sat back down on the leather sofa, feeling the heavy knot of tension in my shoulders begin to uncoil. This was no longer about grief or disappointment. The narrative had shifted entirely. I was watching a corporate disaster movie unfold in real time, and the antagonists had just realized they had locked themselves inside their own trap. They wanted someone younger and cheaper. Now they were about to discover the true cost of their bargain. The first voice message hit my phone at 2:45 that afternoon, barely 3 hours after my text exchange with Clara. The call came from a mobile number I did not recognize, but the tone of the voice was instantly unmistakable. It was Toby Finch, voice message 1. "Hi Harvey, this is Toby Finch. I took over as the lead systems administrator today. I am just calling to ask if you could quickly email over the root admin credentials and biometric bypass keys for Vault DC9. It is kind of urgent because we have some maintenance scheduled. You probably just forgot to hand them over during offboarding. The forced, nervous chuckle at the end of the recording was priceless. Toby sounded exactly like the type of junior candidate Spencer would hire to cut costs. A 25-year-old kid fresh out of a boot camp, brimming with arrogant buzzwords, who thought running a basic script made him an enterprise architect. I did not respond. I let the recording sit there while I took another sip of wine and let the quiet sink in. By 3:30, Toby left his second message. Voice message 2, "Hey Harvey, Toby again. Just following up on those vault credentials. We are completely locked out of the core environment right now, and things are getting a little chaotic up here. Could you please call me back as soon as you get this?" A little chaotic. Standing outside a $35 million data center that will not open for anyone on Earth is not a little chaotic. It is an operational catastrophe. Toby was likely realizing that the server environment he was supposed to manage was locked behind a physical barrier that his certifications had never prepared him to handle. The systems he thought he could easily configure were completely unresponsive without the primary physical signature. By 4:15, the tone of his messages changed dramatically. Voice message 3. Harvey, I really need those bypass keys right now. I do not think you understand the massive position you are putting the department in. Operations are completely halted across 2 divisions. This is affecting live client data. There it was. The first real scent of panic. I could picture him standing in the carpeted hallway outside Vault DC9, sweating through his cheap dress shirt, tapping his foot against the tile while Executive VP Julian Mercer paced behind him like a caged animal. Welcome to the enterprise infrastructure, Toby. You wanted the title, now you get to experience the weight of the responsibility. Your quick boot camp certificates cannot help you bypass physical security laws. By 5 o'clock, Toby had dropped every trace of his earlier arrogance. Voice message 4. Look, Harvey, I know we did not get a chance to meet properly, but this is a massive emergency. I have senior leadership breathing down my neck, and the board is demanding answers. Can you please just help us out? Just tell me how to override the panel, please. The way he stumbled over the word, please, sounded like it physically pained him. The old version of me, the dedicated employee who used to work 80-hour weeks to save unprepared managers from their own mistakes, might have felt a flicker of sympathy. But that version of me had been executed in the Human Resources conference room 5 hours ago. The 6th voicemail arrived at 6:30, and this time Toby sounded near tears. He admitted that the chief operating officer had arrived on site and that the entire executive team was now sitting on folding chairs outside the vault. I closed my phone and smiled. The longer they waited, the more expensive their education was going to become. The call I had been anticipating all evening finally came through at 7:45. The caller identification displayed Julian Mercer's name, blinking on my screen like a warning signal on a failing power grid. I let it ring all the way to voicemail. 50 minutes later, his name lit up the screen a second time. This time I swiped the green bar and answered. Harvey! Hey, I am so glad I finally reached you, Julian said, his voice dripping with an artificial, fast-paced enthusiasm that he usually reserved for quarterly board presentations when he was trying to gloss over missed targets. I remained completely silent, letting the empty space stretch between us until he cleared his throat nervously. Look, Harvey, I just wanted to reach out personally and check in on you. You know there are absolutely no hard feelings about today, right? I have always considered you an invaluable asset to our engineering culture. I still said nothing. The silence on my end was so heavy that I could hear the distinct hum of the building's emergency ventilation system in the background of his call. He was still inside the office, standing in that cold hallway. So anyway, Julian continued, his tone shifting from fake warmth to anxious rambling, we seem to have run into a minor technical hiccup here. At the facility, nothing major, of course, but Toby is having a bit of trouble accessing the Vault DC9 server core. It appears that some of your physical security protocols were not fully documented in the standard handover wiki. Minor hiccup. That was a fascinating choice of words for a complete operational shutdown of a $35 million data hub. You mean the biometric failsafe on Vault DC9? I asked. Keeping my voice perfectly flat and measured, there was a sharp pause on the line before Julian responded. Exactly, yes. The DC9 Vault panel. We were just hoping you could step in, be the bigger professional here, and help us resolve this minor access issue quickly. There is really no reason for any of us to let this escalate into something messy. When I did not immediately offer a solution, his tone hardened into that familiar, passive-aggressive corporate authority that middle managers use when they feel their control slipping. "Harvey," he said, lowering his pitch, "you need to remember that you still have ongoing, professional and contractual duties to this organization. Intentionally withholding critical system access credentials or obstructing core business operations could easily be interpreted as corporate sabotage and a breach of your non-disclosure obligations. We would really hate to involve our legal department and take this down a very painful road for you." I listened to his legal threat with absolute calm, took a slow sip of my wine, and leaned back against the couch cushions. "Julian, do you happen to remember the formal third-quarter cybersecurity audit report I delivered to your desk 6 months ago?" Silence. He did not even inhale. The audit report where I explicitly highlighted the severe single point of failure vulnerability in the custom biometric lock system. The memo where I formally requested $1,200 to purchase a secondary administrator license so another engineer could be provisioned as a backup. The same memo where I warned you in writing that terminating or removing the primary architect without a secondary license would permanently lock the entire facility. I could hear his breathing turn shallow and ragged over the speaker. "The audit report," I continued, "that you personally rejected in writing because you wanted to preserve your quarterly EBITDA efficiency bonus, saving $1,200 while creating a massive compliance hazard. The very same decision that violated our corporate governance framework and exposed the executive leadership to a direct breach of fiduciary duty." Julian gasped as if he had just walked into a room devoid of oxygen. He knew instantly that I had kept every single time-stamped email, every signed rejection slip, and every audit log stored safely off-site. Under corporate law, knowingly ignoring documented infrastructure risks to inflate short-term executive bonuses constitutes a clear breach of fiduciary duty to the board of directors and shareholders. I did not wait for his excuses. I did not need to hear his panicked rationalizations. I simply pressed the end call button and set the phone down. By 9 o'clock that evening, my private message group with my former engineering team was exploding with notifications. The group was called System Ops Core, created years ago during a major cloud migration. Travis O'Neill, our senior infrastructure specialist, posted the first update. "You will not believe the circus happening on the 7th floor right now. Management brought in an external facilities team to try to pick the physical lock." Brenda Cole, our facilities coordinator, chimed in immediately. "They brought in 3 external contractors with industrial toolkits and acoustic sensors. They look like they are trying to break into a bank vault." Stacy Pratt from accounting added a series of updates. "Finance just calculated that our operational downtime loss has officially crossed $3.5 million per hour due to suspended client transactions. The chief operating officer and the vice president of HR are sitting on folding chairs in the hallway eating cold pizza." Travis sent a grainy photograph taken from down the corridor. It showed 10 senior corporate executives in tailored suits, slumped against the tiled wall outside Vault DC9, their ties loosened, their laptops dead, eating cold pepperoni pizza off paper plates at 10 o'clock at night. They looked less like corporate leaders and more like stranded passengers in a bus station after a snowstorm. I stared at the photograph for a long time. This was no longer just a petty workplace victory. It was massive strategic leverage. They had treated me as an invisible, disposable line item on a spreadsheet, assuming that an 18-year career could be replaced by a cheaper junior without any consequences. Now, their hubris was costing them millions every hour. They sat on that cold floor. I opened a new document on my laptop and began drafting the exact terms under which I would even consider speaking to them again. If they wanted access to Vault DC9, they were not just going to pay for my time, they were going to pay for their arrogance. At 8:15 the following morning, the external escalation reached its breaking point. Travis sent a high-priority message to our private group. Harvey, they just brought in an elite third-party cybersecurity team from Apex Security. They have black badges, custom diagnostic hardware, and a lead engineer who claims he can hack anything in 20 minutes. I poured a fresh cup of dark roast coffee and watched the chat updates roll in like a play-by-play broadcast of a slow-motion train wreck. Brenda posted 10 minutes later. The Apex guys attached a high-voltage diagnostic probe directly to the primary scan panel of Vault DC-9. They are trying to bypass the encrypted handshake protocol. I shook my head slowly. They did not understand the complex nature of the system they were attempting to breach. When I constructed the biometric interface during the budget cuts 2 years ago, I knew management might one day attempt a crude physical override if they ever lost control of the system. So I installed a custom hardware safeguard into the voltage regulator behind the primary scanner panel. The safeguard was not destructive, but it was absolute. If any unauthorized technician attempted to apply external voltage or force a brute force hardware bypass, the internal controller would trigger a localized electromagnetic surge. The surge would immediately blow the main logic bus fuse, wipe the volatile local access memory, and permanently freeze the electromechanical locking pins in their fully extended positions. In plain terms, if you tried to force the door, the lock did not open. It sealed itself permanently into a solid block of hardened steel. At 9:30, Travis sent the inevitable message. "Oh my God, they just tried to jump the circuit board." There was a loud pop, a puff of ozone, and the digital display screen on Vault DC-9 went completely black. Brenda added, "The lead Apex contractor just stepped back, packed his diagnostic bag, and told Chief Operating Officer Victoria Sinclair that the primary lock is bricked. He said the firmware is wiped and the physical pins are permanently fused shut." Stacy posted seconds later, "Toby Finch just ran to the restroom to throw up." Julian Mercer is pacing back and forth calling corporate legal counsel, and Human Resources Director Spencer Croft looks like he is about to have a panic attack. The executive team was now facing an unprecedented disaster. The server core was not just locked. It was physically impenetrable by any conventional method. Every hour, the vault remained sealed. The company was hemorrhaging $3.5 million in lost processing revenue and contractual non-compliance penalties with enterprise clients. To make matters worse for the leadership, their legal exposure was expanding rapidly. Under the federal law commonly known as the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act under Title 29 of the United States Code, Section 2101, mass sudden terminations executed without proper notice during covert restructurings exposed the firm to severe federal regulatory fines and employee class action liabilities. I had already forwarded my documentation to a specialized labor attorney who confirmed that the company had committed clear violations of federal law. My phone rang at 11 o'clock sharp. The caller identification did not show Julian or Spencer. It displayed the direct executive line of Victoria Sinclair, the Chief Operating Officer. Victoria was a formidable executive who rarely interacted with mid-level technical staff, known throughout the company for her ruthless efficiency and sharp corporate focus. I let the phone ring 4 times before answering calmly. "Harvey Albright," I said. "Harvey, thank you for taking my call." Victoria began, her voice tight, controlled, but carrying an underlying tremor of intense pressure. "I am calling you directly because the current situation regarding Vault DC-9 has escalated into a critical corporate emergency. We recognize that your departure yesterday was handled in an extremely improper and short-sighted manner by human resources and departmental leadership." I remained completely silent, letting her absorb the weight of her own words. "We are prepared to offer you immediate reinstatement into your previous role as Senior Security Architect." Victoria continued, "with a 40% salary increase, a title promotion to Executive Director of Infrastructure, and retroactive benefits. We will also issue an internal corporate memo acknowledging your foundational role in designing our enterprise architecture." I swirled my coffee mug, listening to her pitch without a trace of emotion. "Mrs. Sinclair," I said evenly, "I am not interested in returning as an employee to an organization that treats senior engineering personnel as disposable assets. I am no longer an employee of this company. However, I am available as an independent emergency consultant." Victoria took a sharp, audible breath. What are your consulting terms, Harvey? My emergency fee is $350,000 for a 4-hour targeted engagement, payable up front via wire transfer before I step foot on the premises. In addition, under Section 106 of Title 17 of the United States Code, regarding federal copyright protection, I retain personal copyright over the custom biometric firmware routines I authored independently prior to my employment. You will sign a complete legal release and indemnification agreement, waiving all claims against me. There was a long, suffocating silence on the line as the chief operating officer calculated the math. Paying $350,000 to unlock a facility that was losing $3.5 million every single hour was an absolute bargain, but it was a massive blow to executive pride. Finally, she spoke. The legal documents and wire transfer will be executed within 30 minutes. First, I said, Human Resources Director Spencer Croft and Vice President Julian Mercer will both sign a formal written statement admitting their gross negligence and compliance failures regarding the third-quarter audit report. This statement will be recorded and broadcast directly to the company-wide communications channel. Second, my name will be permanently registered as the sole primary architect of Vault DC9 in all corporate filings. Once the wire transfer clears and the documents are signed, I will arrive to resolve your incident. Victoria paused for 3 seconds before answering. We accept your terms. The documents are being drafted now. At precisely 1:30 that afternoon, my banking application confirmed the incoming wire transfer of $350,000. The non-financial settlement agreements, executed and signed by corporate legal counsel, were delivered to my email inbox, alongside the formal written apologies from Spencer Croft and Julian Mercer. With the legal protections fully locked in place, I grabbed my coat, grabbed my personal toolkit, and drove to the corporate headquarters for the final time. I arrived at the building at 2 o'clock. Walking through the front glass lobby felt like stepping onto a completely different stage. The receptionist looked up with wide eyes, instantly recognizing me, but this time nobody made a move to stop me or check my credentials. As I walked down the central hallway toward the executive wing, employees stood up from their cubicles. Word had spread through the internal channels like wildfire. A quiet applause started near the accounting department and quickly rippled across the floor as my former colleagues watched their discarded architect return to resolve the chaos created by executive hubris. When I reached the 7th floor, the scene outside Vault DC9 was surreal. The corridor was still littered with empty coffee cups, folded chairs, and diagnostic gear left behind by the failed Apex contractors. The main scanner panel of the vault was scorched and black, completely dead. Spencer Croft and Julian Mercer were standing near the window, looking pale, exhausted, and utterly defeated. Neither of them dared to make eye contact with me as I walked past them. Chief Operating Officer Victoria Sinclair stood near the vault entrance, looking composed but worn down by 30 hours of continuous corporate crisis. You said the lock was bricked, Victoria remarked quietly as I approached the sealed steel door. The primary scanner panel is destroyed, I replied calmly, setting my toolkit on the floor. But when I designed Vault DC9 2 years ago, I anticipated that an incompetent management team might eventually ruin the primary interface through improper maintenance or forced tampering. So I built a secondary fail-safe system. I walked to the adjacent wall, 5 feet to the left of the main entrance. Behind a decorative metal access plate that appeared to be part of the building's HVAC ventilation layout, I pressed a hidden mechanical release. The panel slid silently, revealing a secondary, hardened thermal scanning interface powered by an isolated auxiliary battery circuit. This backup interface was completely isolated from the main logic bus, immune to external voltage surges, and unmentioned in any standard documentation. I placed my palm against the cold glass surface of the secondary reader. The auxiliary display illuminated instantly, casting a clean blue glow across the wall. The system performed a rapid optical verification of my palm print, followed by an encrypted retina check. 3 seconds later, a soft synthetic chime resonated through the hallway, followed by the heavy mechanical disengagement of the primary locking pins inside the doorframe. The massive steel vault door of Vault DC-9 slowly swung open, releasing a cool breeze of air from the server room inside. The server indicator lights flickered back to green across every rack, signaling the full restoration of core enterprise operations. The entire ordeal had been resolved in less than 90 seconds. I turned around to face Victoria Sinclair, Spencer Croft, and Julian Mercer. "The $350,000 consulting engagement is complete," I announced, keeping my voice calm and professional. "Your core infrastructure is fully online, your data is intact, and your system access has been restored. My non-exclusive firmware license is hereby terminated, and any future maintenance will require a new formal agreement at my standard consulting rate." Victoria nodded slowly, offering a brief, respectful nod of her head. "Thank you, Harvey," she said quietly. "You have proven beyond any doubt who actually built this company's backbone." I did not offer a hand to Spencer or Julian. I did not waste time gloating or making speeches. I simply picked up my toolkit, adjusted my coat, and turned toward the exit. As I walked down the corridor toward the elevators, I heard the automated notification ping across every employee computer in the building as the mandatory corporate broadcast went live, distributing the signed apologies and compliance failure admissions of the two men who had tried to discard me 24 hours earlier, stepping out of the building into the afternoon sunshine. I took a deep, clear breath. I had walked into that building 12 years ago as an eager engineer trusting corporate promises. I left it as a free man with $350,000 in the bank, complete legal vindication, and the absolute satisfaction of showing corporate leadership exactly what happens when you treat real technical expertise as disposable. The lesson was simple, elegant, and permanent. Never fire the person who holds the key to your empire.